So I was looking up something about Thanksgiving. It turns out that FDR tried to change the date of Thanksgiving. And this was due to the fact that he thought an earlier Thanksgiving would give merchants a longer period to sell goods before Christmas, increasing profits and spending to bring the country out of the Depression. And at that time, advertising goods for Christmas before Thanksgiving was considered inappropriate. Fred Lazarus Jr., founder of the Federated Department Stores, later called Macy's, is credited with convincing Roosevelt to push Thanksgiving a week earlier to expand the shopping season. So that was fairly controversial at the time. Today we talk about Christmas creep, the fact that Christmas shopping seems to happen earlier every year. We now have Black Friday, which is basically a holiday around consumerism. People die, or they're literally sacrificing their lives on this holiday. And it kind of relates to how I want to respond to a video about Lauren Southern. I don't even remember the name of the guy. He's just this skull with sunglasses. And he's saying, look at Lauren Southern and look at what she represents. She represents Nazism. She represents these white nationalists who are afraid of white people being replaced, who are afraid of white genocide. And he says there's nothing really to fear because migration has always existed, because white people will still be a plurality in 50 years. Even if they're a minority, they'll still be a plurality. And because most immigrants are from other places in Europe, they're not necessarily non-white. So he goes into all these reasons of saying it's not that, and he uses that terminology. He says it's not that bad, and then he kind of corrects himself and says, well, it's not bad at all. It's not bad at all. But, I'm just using Lauren's terminology to say it's not that bad. And then he sort of cites the Irish, and this is the hypocrisy of his argument. He cites the Irish and he says, well, the Irish came to England, and of course the Irish set off the biggest bomb in England since World War II, and they tried to assassinate the Prime Minister, and they did all these things. But today, no one really cares. Today, the troubles are over. Today, it's fine. So he's kind of making this argument that, yes, the Irish at one point, they were terrorists, there was ethnic tension, there was ethnic conflict, but today that's dissolved, and that's a good thing, that we no longer fight over petty things like are you English or are you Irish. Now, what that means to me is essentially it means nothing to be English and it means nothing to be Irish, or at least it means less of a thing. Before, people were willing to fight and to die over their Irishness, and today it doesn't mean anything, and today Catholicism in Ireland doesn't mean anything as an institution. It's broken down. I think they just revoked the blasphemy laws. So Irishness is less important. What's more important is being a global citizen, being a global capitalist, being a global consumer, and fitting this profile, this kind of universal cog in the machine, the interplaceable or interchangeable part that you are just kind of like, instead of a factory on an assembly line, you're a consumer in a hive mind, or you're a consumer in this globalized virtual factory where you are the product, you are what's being sold. So, when we talk about Thanksgiving, when we talk about FDR, when we talk about Christmas creep, when we talk about Black Friday, when we talk about changing traditions to make a profit, when we talk about forming our traditions in our society around the concept of profit, and when we talk about the great replacement, when we talk about migration, when we talk about changing culture, when we talk about race and whiteness, when we talk about the dissolution of the Irish independence movement and the dissolution of the Catholic Church in Ireland, all of these topics, to me, are really just one big topic. And it is the destruction of identity outside of consumerism, outside of you are defined by how much money you have. Education is defined as your ability to make money. So a person is considered to be more educated if they better defend the capitalist system. And that can, again, it can either mean you're educated in the sense of you have a degree in finance and so you can go work in a bank, or it can be educated in the sense that you are a human resources officer and you are meant to destroy any identitarian feeling in the corporate culture, and you're meant to constantly reinforce this concept that, you know, we're all interchangeable parts and your language doesn't matter, your culture doesn't matter, your religion doesn't matter. What matters is your dedication to profit. So you have the human resources manager who's kind of like the priestly figure there managing the whole religion. And you have people who are then not priests in terms of the human resources manager, but they're priests in terms of teaching children, becoming college professors, inducting people into this religion that nothing matters except for your consumer status. And think of how people relate to one another. People relate to one another on the basis of consumer goods and consumer media. Oh, you like the anime that I like. You play the same video game that I like. You consume the same entertainment that I consume. And so therefore we're somehow similar. Whereas I would think, isn't that a superficial thing? I mean, when you think about your family and you think about men and women have very different interests. And so men might be interested in Minecraft and women might be interested in makeup tutorials. But despite the fact that they do not share interests and they don't consume the same type of media necessarily, I would think that a brother and a sister would be much closer in terms of their more fundamental genetic interests, their more fundamental familial interests, the fact that they grew up in the same household. There's so much more binding them together on a deep level than these superficial consumer interests. So, to me, it seems, when you consider the fact that human psychology does not change at the drop of a hat, that to revolve everything around consumer interests is a very shallow and superficial way to organize society. And I think what it leaves people with a feeling of is a nihilism, a meaninglessness, because they look at the construction of society and they see it as fiat, right? They see it as superficial, they see it as contrived and artificial. It's not based on anything stable, it's not based on our deep psychology. Deep psychology is where we get our spirituality, our religion, our sexuality. All of these very deep and meaningful things in life are sort of being pushed to the side. Think of workplace harassment. Think of the concept of sexual harassment. The idea is that sex has to be this sterilized plastic thing. It has to be organized around consent, which is like a legal contract. So you've got your classical liberalism, you have your capitalism. Everything is focused around kind of making sex safe for the corporate environment. And so that means you can do whatever. I mean, you can have any kind of sex possible, but it has to be done within this corporatized, consent-based and everything. And you look at history, and you even look at what people want in sex, and people don't want this sterilized. I'm not even sure how to describe it. The feminism, not the feminization, because feminization is something different, but there is an emasculation to it. There is a consumptive act to it, rather than a focus on reproduction, rather than a focus on conquest, which is what sex typically has been. Daphne and Apollo. Apollo is chasing Daphne. He's trying to conquer Daphne. He's not, trying to hook up with her on Tinder. It's a very different relationship. So everything is changing in a very deep way, and the result is that people are confused and people are very disturbed on an emotional level, and they feel empty. Everything is ironic. Nothing is serious. You can't take anything serious. You can't look anyone in the eye and say, this is a serious relationship that we have. There are certain taboos. There are certain limits. There is really nothing except Nazism. Nazism is the only limit that we have in our society. You can even criticize, Israel and Jews, and you can make fun of them, and that's fine. And at the end of the day, that's something that is permissible and acceptable in a certain context. But Nazism is really never permissible. It's really never acceptable. And so that's the one limit we are left with. The only limit, the only thing you're not allowed to do is to be an authoritarian, which is a really strange, hypocritical, oxymoronic society to live in. But that is the one we find ourselves in. And on the face of it, it's like, wait, you're saying to me that the only purity that we have in our society, the only authority we have, the only objectivity we have is the fact that there is no objective morality. There, everything is relative, that we can never embrace purity, that there is no true authority. That these are the only things that we can hold as like the three pillars of our morality, is the rejection of, objective morality, because that leads to Nazism. We have to reject the concept of purity because that leads to Nazism. We have to reject the concept of authority because that leads to Nazism. So these are the kind of three pillars that we have, and maybe you could consider more. But it is a very strange situation, and people see it as hollow. People understand it to be hypocritical. And so people are really at a loss and looking for some kind of meaning and very disturbed. And they're trying to fulfill it. They're trying to fulfill it through means that they know. And the means that they know are consumption, right? They know consumption. They know how to consume. That's what they've been taught to do. But it's never going to solve the inherent contradictions of the system. Working within the system, you can't actually solve its own contradictions. And that doesn't mean people are going to stop trying, but it's set up intentionally in that way to drive further consumption. Because people look at the system, they say, oh, the system's terrible, it's all messed up, we need to disengage, we need to become organic farmers or something, and then they find a new organic farmer marketing scheme to, sell you the health products and the veganism and the organic food and whatever. So they're selling the Birkenstocks and they're selling this hippie lifestyle, and it's just another consumer niche. It's just another outlet for your frustrations. You're not actually solving the fundamental problems. So again, it's from both sides, right? Because on the one hand, the left wing is, not seeing the big picture. All they see is like, we have minority groups, we have victim groups, and we just always have to attack who's ever in power, and we have to sympathize with who's disempowered, and they're totally clueless about power relations, and their idea of who's in power is like, and it's almost Donald Trump was elected because people hated him because he represented what the left has as a bugaboo. He's a rich, blonde-haired guy. He's a rich, blonde-haired guy. That's who they believe controls the earth, which is a really silly thing to believe, but that's who they think controls the earth. And because they hated him so much, they attacked him viciously. They used every lie and smear against him. And the average person said, why do you hate this guy so much? Maybe he's a good guy. Because if you hate him so much, he must be good. It's not that he's necessarily such a good guy, but that they hated him so much. And the average Republican or something said, well, if they hate him, then he must be good because they hate me as well. That's the left wing. And then the right wing, they're talking about the great replacement. And oftentimes they don't see it in the context of the objective here is not white genocide itself. I mean, you can say like there is some certain sect of people who believe that white people are the Amalekites. I'm going to tell you right now that there might be, some Orthodox people who like read the Bible and they say, oh, Amalekites, and then they think that's white people and then they want to destroy them. And there might be a certain, very religious faction of people who are believers in that. It's possible. But to me, the greater system doesn't require any kind of, belief that white people are the Amalekites. I think the greater thing is just you have to destroy bastions of identity. You have to destroy anything that doesn't fit into the capitalist consumer marketplace. Anything that stands in the way. So look at Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was traditionally this Christian holiday. Now it's been manipulated into a consumer holiday. The same thing with Christmas, right? Christmas is supposed to be a time when you let go of your materialism, let go of your egoism, let go of all those, bestial urges, and you reconnect with Christ. You reconnect with some kind of higher purpose, You reconnect with some kind of higher order that puts aside that cyclical desire for immediate satisfaction, and you reflect upon the year, and you do what truly matters, which is you spend time with the people who are genetically close to you, the people who are close to you. You've built bonds with them throughout your life through experiences, real experiences with people. It's totally been inverted, and this is just like a classic technique of inversion done over and over again. It's really tedious, monotonous, in fact. The concept of an inversion, like you take the cross and you just put it upside down, and now you're a Satanist. Oh, I'm a Satanist. I just do everything the opposite of what the Bible tells me to do, and that's so edgy and cool. But it's really boring. It's really boring. The concept of the Great Replacement or white genocide, if you don't see that in a larger context, then where are you going to be except in 1964? In 1964, America was effectively a white nationalist country, right? We had those quotas on certain nations, and so as a result, there was protections in place to make sure that the demographics of the country would look the same in the future because of how we were fixing the quotas of each immigration rate for each country. So, like Netherlands, England, Germany, these countries, you could allow in a lot of immigrants, but, Africa or somewhere, very few. Asia, very few. So this is how things were designed in 1964. And so we could get back to 1964 because we got to stop the Great Replacement. We need a white nationalist government. We need a white nationalist constitution. And this is what people will say sometimes. These white nationalists, or they'll say, we just need a constitution that we don't care if you're on the left, we don't care if you're on the right, we don't care if you're liberal or conservative or a Democrat or Republican, or whether you're about socialism or capitalism. It doesn't matter. You just have to respect the demographics. And as long as we have the demographics, as long as we're racially white, I don't care if you're from Poland or Russia or Ukraine or England or Chile, as long as you're racially white, then that's fine. As long as we're back at 1964, then everything will be okay. But everything won't be okay. That doesn't solve the fundamental problem. Racial disillusion is not a goal in and of itself. For some people it is. Maybe for racially mixed people, maybe for people who hate the concept of homogeneity because they don't fit into that concept, and so they rebel against it. Maybe for some people. But I think the overall scheme here, the overall desire here, is to dissolve anything that stands against the capitalist machine, a global consumer order. Anything, and race is a part of that. Religion is a part of that. Sexual identity is a part of that. Gender identity. So they want to dissolve pretty much anything that is not conducive to a global consumer model. Anytime someone says, you know what, I don't really care about material things so much, I care about defending my clan, my tribe, my masculinity, my pride, my honor. They see these things as obstacles to consumerism, and so they want to destroy them. And yes, race is one of those things, but it's just one of many things. If you planted your pitchfork in the ground and you said, you know what, we're going to go back to 1964, then they would say, fine, great, we'll just not touch the racial issue, but we'll destroy everything else. We'll destroy you sexually, we'll destroy your concept of gender, we'll destroy your concept of religion, we'll destroy your concept of collective and group and identity, and we'll reduce you to little atomistic consumers. And if everyone is in a dog-eat-dog world, Darwinian, capitalist consumer market, then all it takes is a group of two to overthrow everyone else. Because if everyone is acting individualistically, then they can be controlled by whomever chooses to recognize the power of collectives. And so that is a divide and conquer strategy. That is how you weaken people. You remove everything that binds them together other than money. And then if money is the only power left in the world, if masculinity has no power, if pride and honor have no power, if religion has no power, if race has no power, if those concepts are meaningless, which is what they say. Oh, race is a meaningless concept. It's a social construct. Gender is a meaningless concept. It doesn't matter. Religion is meaningless. It's make-believe. It's nothing. So they go on and on down the list. This is what the capitalist does. He goes on and on down the list of saying this is meaningless, this is nihilistic, this is nothing, and it's all worthless. And you know what has worth? You know what's the only thing that matters in the world? Money. Money can buy you anything. Money can give you everything that you desire. All these other things, they're worthless. They're nothing. But what you need is money. Buy this, buy that. Get education, get a job so that you can make more money and buy more things, and then you're going to be happy. And then you're going to find the true meaning of life, because religion is worthless and stupid, based on lies, and gender is just a bunch of lies, and race is just a bunch of lies by, white people who want to feel good about themselves, white people who are just worthless failures, and they want to connect themselves to Nikola Tesla and to Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, and so they make up this concept of race that's totally false and based on nothing. And if it does have any roots in anything, it's probably in Christianity. Christianity is probably to blame for the concept of race, and Christianity is based on lies, and Jesus Christ never existed, and they can just go on and on attacking with Socratic nihilism anything that is not based in money, anything that is not based in a consumer capitalist market. That is the driver behind all of it. And so if you don't attack that on the fundamental level, what you're going to result in is a very, very white 1964 progressing into transgenderism, progressing into, because conservatives fight all these little fights, right? They say, no, we're going to put our stick in the ground, we're going to make a constitutional amendment, like George Bush did, the Defense of Marriage Act, and we're going to say that marriage is between a man and a woman. Okay, we won that fight. All right, now we're going to go to immigration. We're going to say we're going to stop immigration. We got Donald Trump elected. We're going to build the wall. We're going to remove birthright citizenship, and we got that one done. Okay, what's next down the line? Now we got to protect the sexuality. We got to ban the transgenders from the military. We got to do this, do that. And so you're fighting these battles piecemeal. And every time the justification is, we need to defend this sacred institution, we need to defend this tradition because the left is trying to, destroy our normal way of life, never understanding the impetus behind it, never understanding that the spirit of disillusion is everywhere because it all comes from the same source. It is all according to the same logic. If you are trying to make money, and people are neglecting to purchase your consumer products or buy into your entertainment, your virtual reality system, because they have pride in their masculinity, pride in their race, pride in their nation, pride in their family. If they derive value from anything other than this global capitalist consumption machine, then your profits suffer. So you have to destroy whatever it is, wherever it is. And getting back to 1964 is not going to solve that fundamental problem. It's merely going to cordon off and say, oh, no, you can't touch race, but you can touch everything else. You can touch gender, you can touch sexuality, you can touch religion, you can touch everything else. And you can destroy it all. And once that's all destroyed, it's going to be easy to come back and destroy race. So, again, I'm not saying that this is going to solve anything in the immediate term on a global scale. But what I'm saying is that conservatives who just see things under attack and they say, well, I don't like that because that's an attack on my identity, without realizing the spirit that's behind it, without realizing the intention that's behind it, the logic behind it. It's very reasonable, it's rational. It makes sense from the point of a capitalist to want to promote transgenderism. It makes sense to want to promote race mixing. It makes sense. It's logical. It's good for your profits. This system is not going to collapse under itself. This system is very robust. Brazil is very robust. We are going toward Brazil. We're looking at a hybridization of Sweden and Brazil. The sexuality and sex politics of Sweden and the racial politics of Brazil. And we're probably going to add on some Chinese authoritarianism, spyware and whatever, surveillance state. We're looking at an amalgamation of all these dystopias. And it's something that works. It's something that's stable. I mean, look at North Korea. North Korea, without the sanctions, a very stable state. So you can have a state, theoretically, which is very oppressive, very dystopian, very harmful toward the soul and the spirit. And it's a very stable thing, and there's not a lot you can do to threaten it. So conservatives just kind of stamping your foot in the ground and saying, you shall not pass, and we don't feel comfortable with you dissolving our identity, and they just feel this innate need to defend themselves when they're under attack. Okay, but you're not identifying the fundamental spirit about it, and all these conservatives will defend capitalism and the free market. And that, yeah, white people have the best economics. White people are so good at making money, and that's why we should be white nationalists, because white countries are so rich, and we make all this technology, and it's so awesome. Okay, you're defending white people on the basis that they best feed this, monster consumer capitalist thing that's just going to destroy everything else. And so to what hand did white people play in creating this thing? Well, it's to an extent it's always been around. The conflict between agriculturalism and human health has always been around. I mean, you have a species that's really built for hunting and gathering, and then you introduce agriculturalism, there's a whole host of health problems that result. You can look into the archaeological record and you can look at the teeth, and we start getting cavities. We're really not meant to get cavities. If all you eat is meat, well, there's not a lot of sugar in meat, and so the kind of bacteria that cause you cavities are not going to be viciously rotting your teeth out. Your teeth are just mostly full of scraps of meat or whatever. Whereas you switch to this grain, this carbohydrate, sugar diet, and yeah, of course people are going to get huge holes in their teeth. That's just one example. Now we look at obesity, we look at all the problems. But the tension between evolving as a species, and our psychology, that's always been there, right? The problems that arise whenever you have a human species that is able to change its environment, but it's not able to evolve genetically, psychologically quickly enough to catch up, and then it's building kind of systems upon systems. So we have the lizard brain, we have the mammal brain, we have the human consciousness, and they're all built on top of each other. And there's kind of a patchwork system of hypocrisy and irony and contradictions there that have never been resolved, but it's well, it's good enough to work. And we have hiccups, right? Physically, we hiccup from time to time, and scientists theorize that perhaps that's from a time when we were fish in the ocean, and hiccuping has to do with the gills. And we've kept hiccups because they're kind of benign, they're kind of benevolent, they're not bad enough to affect our reproducibility. And so we just kind of accept them as part of being human. We have hiccups. We're human. We're not perfect. We're not robots. We're not intelligently designed from the top down. We've kind of evolved over time in this way. And so as a result, there are hiccups, but the hiccups are becoming big, and the hiccups are becoming malevolent, and they're destroying people's lives, and they're making people miserable, because this need to evolve and to adapt and to become a bigger, better global capitalist consumer system that is capable of creating this global hive mind to calculate problems with artificial intelligence, to expand into the galaxy and to extract all the resources and to create nanobots and new technologies to destroy everything that stands in our path and build the ultimate evolutionary system that's going to take over the universe. That desire is using human spirit and human soul as a raw material to be exploited, using the human desire for inclusion and acceptance and brotherhood and relationships with one another. It's exploiting that desire to fuel the system, and it's doing so intelligently in a manipulative way, in a sociopathic way. And yeah, it does harm people, and people are, there are casualties of this, because that's the intention, to use people and to grind them up and to suck all the energy and juice out of them and then spit them out and leave them, old and dying, and no one cares about them, because they're just surrounded by cats, or they're surrounded by anime pillow waifus, or whatever they are. Or they're, regretting the fact that their children hate them because, they're divorced and they never get to see their kids because they've lost parental rights, There's all kinds of problems that people are experiencing. And if you don't understand the reason why these problems are occurring, then you're only going to be able to attack the problem in a piecemeal reactionary way. And that's what I'm kind of against here, is the reactionary right, the conservative right, just looking at ways in which capitalism, and they don't think it's capitalism, they think it's the left, and they're so surprised that, Antifa defends capitalism, but effectively they're like, oh, isn't that hypocritical? Well, no, it's not hypocritical, because anything that attacks identity is in its nature capitalist. Capitalism just means that you want to eliminate anything which is not a transactable currency, something that's not fluid. You want to destroy geography, you want to destroy borders, you want to destroy everything that prevents a product from moving here to there in the quickest manner. You want to destroy people's loyalty to a brand. You want people to just hop on some new fashion or new bandwagon because, if you sell, it's planned obsolescence. If you sell someone a car and they say, I love this car, I want to use it for the rest of my life, well, then you have nothing more to sell them. But if you tell them, okay, you can buy the car, but next year buy this bigger and better one because that's what's in fashion. It's more compact and sleek, and this one has this feature and this one has that. And really the color this fall is green, so you should really buy a green car. But now it's the summer again and it should be red. So they want to make people fashionable creatures. They don't want people to be loyal to some kind of tradition. They want people to be ever changing, constantly reformulating in this kind of like split personality, bipolar, just constant. That's why they love the idea of brain plasticity, the idea that your brain can just change and change and change over again. You're always stuck in this childlike state of constantly chasing novelties. They love that because it fuels their system. And the bigger and the better and the more powerful their system is, the more people buy into it, the more people contribute to it, then the more robust it is and the more power it gives to the people at the top who actually control it, who skim 1% off of everyone else. The bankers, the people who they don't do any work themselves, they just, they sit at the top of a bank and they skim off 1% of 1%, and that ends up being trillions of dollars that they control. So this is what they promote. It's very logical. I mean, if you were at the top, if you really controlled everything in the system, then that would be the best way to maintain and to expand your control, is to just destroy anyone's ability to collectivize over anything and to make everyone an atomistic individual, make any kind of group affiliation that anyone has completely worthless and laughable. If you identify with your race, you're a racist. If you identify with your nation, you're a nationalist, and that's terrible and genocidal and evil, and you should be killed or punched in the face. If you identify with your gender, you're a sexist. If you identify and you think that it's worth anything, then you're definitely a sexist, because it doesn't mean anything. Women can do everything a man can do, and there's no qualitative differences there. I can just keep repeating myself in this way, but I think you get the point. It makes sense from the top. And ultimately, and that's why I kind of agree with Marx at the end of the day. This is a class warfare, but it's not the bourgeois versus the proletariat. It is the 1% of 1% of 1%, some extremely tiny minority of people for whom everything that's going on is 100% logical and is in their interest. And then you have the 90% or 99% of everyone else who is being hurt by this. And you have levels to this, right? You have the people at the very bottom who are being given free welfare. And so they think, oh, this capitalist system's pretty great because I just get all this free stuff for doing nothing. They're probably being hurt on a spiritual level, because if you just are a leech, if you're a parasite in this life, you're probably going to be reborn as a cockroach or something disgusting. All those creatures were like, if God created all the animals on the planet, why would he create these disgusting like centipedes and things? Well, you're probably going to be reincarnated like that if you spend your life on welfare. So they think it's awesome, but it's probably really bad for them in the next life. And then you have people who are in the middle who realize that the system's against them, the middle class, and they're like, this is terrible. We need Trump. We need to change something. And they're like very uneducated and confused, and they don't know what to do. They think like, oh my gosh, socialism's evil. And like, but, you know, at the end of the day, at least they understand that the system's trying to destroy them. They don't know what to do about it. They don't know what the system even is. They think it's like Bernie Sanders is coming for them, but then you have the people slightly above that, the upper middle class, and these people are kind of a mixed bag. They might actually understand the system and be a little more against it than the average middle class person, or they might go the other way. They might say, hey, you know, there's some benefit to this. Like, globalism's not so bad. I get to travel around the world. I'm kind of in the middle management of this thing. And yeah, I kind of like globalism. I don't think we need these identities because I'm rich, because I have all this capital. And so they buy into the capitalist vision. But ultimately they're being harmed as well. And maybe the people at the very top are being harmed on some deep spiritual level. But materially, they have everything to gain from the disillusion of your identity, whatever it is, whoever you are. And they're coming for you next. You know, you think white people are the only ones to be affected by this, and this is what the white nationalists think, that the system's only after white people, it only hates white people. It only hates white people because the white race traditionally, and white racialism, has been the biggest opposition to, you know, global capitalist consumer market. When that is no longer the case, and it will no longer be the case if trends continue, they're going to come after whoever's next on the chopping block. They're going to come after the Chinese. They're going to come after whoever's next. And, you know, it's not going to be pretty for all you people when you also lose your ability to have your Asian pride or your black pride or whatever. They come for you and they destroy your masculinity, and you're going to feel everything. And you know, you look at white people and you celebrate right now because white people are under attack, and you think that's great. You know, this is revenge for colonialism. But when you're next on the chopping block, it's not going to be so happy. And to some extent, it's already happening. But, you know, when white people are taken out, everyone else is going to be fair game. And it's going to be very miserable for everyone involved. So, I mean, what do? You have to promote identity as a thing in itself, basically. You know, that's identitarianism. But unfortunately, the term there's been a kind of an aborted attempt to popularize the term in a way that is, you know, just associated with it's just a fancy term for nationalism. But that's not what the term should be. We just need to understand that if you're at the very top, there's a very logical dissolution of identity that's required to maintain and increase your power. If you're not at the top, then what benefits you actually is not material things. What benefits you are gaining back something in your life that's not superficial, gaining back a sense of seriousness, a sense of purity, a sense of authority, and banishing that nihilism, banishing that relativism. It is something that our ancestors have more of and that we have less of. And so we can be healthier, we can gain back a lot of our healthy mental functioning, our healthy spiritual functioning, if we recognize the validity of identity and we work toward that. We understand capitalism is the biggest enemy of identity, and we can go from there. So as long as we have that understanding and we're on board, then we can start going in a really deeply productive direction. Until then, again, it's going to be battle after battle without understanding the war. You know, it would be like there's constantly a border incursion. It would be like, you know, let's say you have some hypothetical state, like let's say you have Great Britain, and let's say people keep invading Great Britain, and they just keep blowing stuff up, and you're blowing stuff up here, blowing stuff up there, and you're like, who's doing this? Why are they doing this? And so every day you go and you put out a fire over here in London, you go put out a fire in Liverpool, and every day you're putting out these fires. And so you're a firefighter. That's a conservative, right? The conservative is a firefighter. He goes around and he says, oh, we got to put out a fire here, put out a fire there. And if he's a really good, powerful conservative, if he's good and efficient and smart, then he's going to put out those fires pretty quick, and he's going to do a good job. But if he doesn't know who's starting the fires, who is this arsonist, who's blowing stuff up, then he's never going to solve the fundamental problem. If you understand the fundamental problem, you've moved beyond conservatism, and you understand that really the guy putting on all these fires is actually, the fire insurance banker, who profits every time that a fire goes up because his sales increase. Broken window fallacy, Keynesian economics. So you understand that guy, you arrest that guy, or you punish him to the full extent of the law, and all of a sudden you notice there's a whole lot less fires, right? So you identify capitalism, you attack capitalism at the root, you do it philosophically, and that is a much better long-term situation. If you just do the conservatism, or like George Soros is attacking us, or even the nationalism, or we need to preserve the white race, and like, oh, it's George Soros again. That, again, you're kind of moving down the iceberg in terms of superficiality, but if you want to get at the core of it, what's the core seed of all this stuff? Where does it all come from? It is capitalism. You identify that, then you have a solid, stable, sturdy ground from which to work and analyze the problems, and it all becomes very logical. And it's no longer confusing, like, why are they promoting this stuff? It doesn't even make sense. They're promoting it to humiliate you and to demoralize you and to make you more dependent on the consumer system. So you see it for what it is, and it makes sense, and you don't have to be angry or confused anymore. You can just understand what the battle is. You understand who the enemy is. As soon as you understand the enemy, things are clear. You don't have to worry, because it's very disturbing when you're being attacked by ghosts. Like, you're just walking down the street and you feel you're being slapped in the left and the right. You're being shot at. You don't know who's shooting at you. It's a very scary feeling. You understand the enemy very clearly. You understand where the shootings come from. You understand what you have to do. Whether you fail or succeed is a different question, but if you have that deep understanding, then life makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot easier to deal with, basically. So I guess that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye-bye.